Welcome to the Ask the Devs panel. We're the devs. We're OpenTofu maintainers of varying degrees of being on OpenTofu maintaining. Clearly, I've practiced a lot for this dev session. Let's introduce ourselves. My name is Larry Bordowitz.
My name is Christian Mesh, sponsored by Spacelift.
And I'm Diogenes Fernandes, sponsored by Gruntwork.
And I'm Larry Bordowitz, sponsored by Harness. So we'd like to open this to the floor for any questions that you have around the OpenTofu project. Questions, and it can be almost anything. So let's open it up over here. We have our first question.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Hello. For an absolute beginner, what's the best way to contribute and get involved?
The best way to contribute is joining our Slack, asking questions there, providing issues, trying out the 1.11 beta or the nightlies on non-production workflows, trying things out there and giving feedback. Those are the best way, and I really can't understate how important that is. I mean, it kind of might not be obvious, but we're Go developers. We're not working with .tf files every day all the time. So if you have .tf files and you're able to use your files and work with OpenTofu and find everything works great, or find, oh, there's a crash, that is the best way you can give back.
So just in addition to the important points that Larry mentioned, all of our repositories, they have issues with labels called good first issue. So it's good for beginners if you want to deep dive on the code, but like everything related to what Larry said, it's really important as well.
And one more thing, I believe I mentioned this in my talk as well, but it bears repeating, is we have a RFC process. So anyone can, based on an issue or just with an idea they've had, put together an RFC based off of a very rough template we have and put in a pull request. That is a place where we have conversations about the feature, about the idea, about the proposed changes. And that it's designed to be both technical and non-technical. It should have a description from a user's perspective of how this feature is going to be useful, how it's going to be interacted with, and then also a bit of a discussion on how it could be implemented by either the people on the stage or community members helped by the maintainer group. So feedback on RFCs, even if it's I love this idea, or I would use this part of the feature but not that part of the feature, would be incredibly helpful. Thank you.
That answers your question? Great.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, so we got off Doug, go for it.
Just want to say thank you all again so much. I do have a question, though. Regarding the new OCI registry support, are there any advantages or additional features that using that over like a traditional registry offer for modules or providers?
So I think the main one is it's all within your control. You can set up your own security scanners, set up your own controls around it, versus a public registry, which is more of a smorgasbord, which, again, it depends on what you're looking for within your organization. OCI can be as open or locked down as you want, and it is instead of having to, if you were going to run a private module registry locally, you'd have to spin up a service, edit some configuration, get that going. With OCI, a lot of organizations already have some form of OCI server that has security controls, that has access controls all built in, and you should just be able to plug that into OpenTofu. One of the more interesting implementations is GitLab recently added support for OCI registries where if you, as part of your organization, publish a provider or publish a module, it automatically integrates it so that you can easily plug it into your project using the OCI registry feature. So it's a mixture of convenience, security, and just not having to deploy and run another service because most people already have OCI built into their infrastructure in some way.
That answered your question?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
This is a question that gets asked a lot. For context, every KubeCon, every OpenTofu Day, we have one of these Ask the Dev sessions. They're always very popular. So here's one more of these. And the question that we often get every time, and the answer changes every time because there's a lot of learning from interacting with the community and from just running a very large-scale project. So as you look back at the last 12, 24 months, how has your process of talking to the community, figuring out what to prioritize, and not giving more voice to folks that are just yelling or very vocal and trying to balance the needs of the community, how has your thinking around that evolved, and what sort of learning have you had?
So that's a good multi-part question.
Yeah,
sorry.
Thank you.
So I think I can give. I've got the most seniority on this team as far as like experience of the roller coaster that was the 1.6 release all the way through where we are today. I think the biggest change from my perspective is that we have, and I know these guys will have different perspectives, but we have published our governance, we have complied with that governance, and we are now openly inviting people to come help us run this project. So we do have people like Roger who do serve as a well-defined role within the technical steering committee. But functionally speaking, anyone can add items to the agenda, anyone can propose large changes to the OpenTofu project through this, put in a PR to the governance, to the charter, to any of these things. And it means that we now have a better idea of who the people involved in OpenTofu are, what the responsibilities are, and I feel like defining that gives people, the community, a sense of, okay, I know who to interact with, I know who to ask about this thing, or I know a role that I might want to play someday, and I might want to strive to that. It's also one of the reasons that Sebastian earlier today called me the technical lead. When we first started OpenTofu, we did have governance. This was registered with the Linux Foundation, but we were so focused on getting OpenTofu 1.6 out, 1.7, 1.8, just getting our feet under us, getting the technical side of the project going, that some of those pieces fell by the wayside. And luckily, everyone involved in the project was so incredibly kind and generous that it never really became a massive issue, but it was time to fix it. So in the interim, one of the reasons I did take on the technical lead role for OpenTofu was to bridge that gap between the community, between the developers, and between the technical steering committee. What we have now is something that's a lot healthier. There's transparency within that whole process, and I'll just say I'm sleeping a heck of a lot better at night. That's been enough for me. That's on like the organizational side of things, but there was a bunch of other parts of that question. Dio, Larry?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you.
In terms of community outreach, I can't say anything to the past 12 months, given that I joined the maintainers in August. But I largely joined the group of maintainers in August because of community outreach that OpenTofu as a program has been a lot more seeking out to the community in terms of we're here, we want to shepherd contributions, make sure everybody's voice is heard. So to your point of how do you balance the loudest versus those most needed, I don't think there's really a need to balance it when you have a large community of excited people who are enthusiastic. You draw as many people as you can. You harness the enthusiasm that people have, and you channel that into action.
That's very well said. What's interesting is, and this is going to sound weird because I got hired as a developer. Long term for OpenTofu, I want to be writing less code, which sounds silly because I very much enjoy writing code. It's what I've been doing for the past however many years. I've actually, oh God, I don't even want to think about how long I've been doing this. Anyways, I see long term, and this is my own personal view. This isn't necessarily respective of other folks on the team, but I see the success of the project as we become stewards. We are stewards, but our role is to foster excited people and passionate people and their enthusiasm in this project, as Larry said. That is one of the most rewarding things I find as an engineer. And I think we're doing a pretty good job, given that I was one of the earliest hires of OpenTofu, but I was hired just as a developer with an eye on maintaining open source projects. But both Dio and Larry were contributors to OpenTofu long before they ever were hired to work on it. So seeing that we can take people who are interested in helping out and give them, the maintainers can give people enough of a push, enough guidance to match their enthusiasm to allow amazing things like that to happen is showing that we are making progress in that. Do we still have a ways to go? Yes, but I think everyone here on stage has had an experience where they've enjoyed helping someone in the community complete a project. I think multiple at this point. And that is, the more I see that, the more I think we are truly succeeding as an open source community, and we are doing the right thing.
So that's a good segue to my next question here. Could Larry, Dio, and Christian, could you each talk a little bit about where you would like to see Tofu in, say, 5 years, and like in the mid to long term horizon? What's a perfect experience like, and where do you see the project going on the longer term horizon?
Hackable. I want anybody who can open up OpenTofu, run Go Build, which you already can do a Go Build, but you can go into the source code, any package, understand how to modify it, and it's hackable. It is something that is intuitive. The execution can be gone through. You can put a debug breakpoint anywhere and know when it will hit when you're running the execution model, and you can make actual differences just intuitively. Right now, the code base, not as intuitive as it could be.
Lovely
We
answer.
want to work on that.
Yeah. So like one thing that really excites me on the project right now is the move that we are doing toward providers, because I would like to see Tofu really extensible. So like, for example, like you are calling a provider and you can put a hook on, in the middle of it and do something that is customized for your needs, you know. So, and I think we are really close to that, like we are defining this kind of stuff, but it's not like in 6 years. I think something really near, maybe one year, I don't know, but yeah, so it's something that really excites me on the project.
You guys took the two good ones. Let's see. I mean, where do I see Tofu in 6 years? I think that there's a lot of ideas around what OpenTofu does today. There's a lot of limitations in what OpenTofu does today, and I want to focus on removing those limitations. I want us to focus on being the best tool we can for the largest number of people possible without losing the focus on building something that is well-defined. I think that I'm kind of talking around this, but I think the best example here is Golang. It is a very well-focused language. It knows what it does what it does well, and it does add components over time, but it tries to justify them well. I want to make OpenTofu's feature set grow over time, but in a way that is consistent, is simple, and is easy to understand. I think we'll still be, if I had to guess, this is not a promise, this is my own gut feeling, I don't think we're going to be moving away from 1.0 within that time. I think keeping that 1.0 compatibility promise, I frequently say that I quote Torvalds and say, we don't break user space. Nobody here wants to upgrade Tofu and have a big warning message saying, hey, this feature is no longer supported. You have to change 4,000 Tofu files or TF files. That's not something we want to do. But at the same time, we want to extend the tool, we want to evolve the tool, but keep that original spirit of simplicity alive.
So the year's 2030 now, and everyone's vibe coding all day long and all that. So have you put into some thought into kind of how that experience, like whether it should be encouraged, discouraged, whether like how the TOFU roadmap should help or assist along the way?
Yeah, that's a good question. So like, at least on the TOFU side, like writing Terraform or TOFU codes, I tried that with some different AIs, but I didn't enjoy the results. I think the training data was just like bad examples of Terraform or TOFU code. So I think there's a long way to improve that.
But for 2030, like let's say Imagine gets 10 times or 100 times better than it is today. How do you think OpenTofu fits into that sort of ecosystem?
Yeah, I think it's going to be better. Like we actually have a lot of issues on improving the documentation with best practices and all this kind of stuff. So maybe if the LLMs are training better data in small time, it's going to be improved a lot.
We do, for those of you who don't know, we do have an MCP server that is built based on our registry user interface, and that allows you to hook that into your infrastructure to get up-to-date documentation and information about modules, providers, that sort of thing. But honestly, at the rate things change, I think at some point we'll either hit a cliff with LLMs where they can't really get much better, or we're going to cross the Rubicon, and who knows when that's going to be. It's just, while we're on the topic, I'm going to note that at least for OpenTofu, we're all organic developers.
Yeah.
So it's organic. It's a stupid joke I came up with, but given the license restrictions of the project and other, let's say, similar projects that are under a source available license, we on the OpenTofu project do not accept, at least as of today, AI-assisted contributions. I think we may someday. It's an open conversation, but that is a conversation with lawyers that I am not qualified to have, other than make jokes about being an organic developer.
All about the source code origination, right? Yeah.
Exactly. I think at OpenTofu, we never want to be a legal precedent for something. We try to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah, Glenn, go
We
ahead.
have one question there.
Yeah, you mentioned best practices, and that's something that I think, I don't know, there are few and far between truly best practices, because a lot of this is more maybe of an art than a science in a lot of ways, and it's
I
all
agree.
very specific to an organization. I guess I'm curious it sounds like you're putting some effort into maybe coming up with some best practices or good practices. Is that something that is that maybe you're looking for contributions from the community on?
110%.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one thing that OpenTofu doesn't have today, and at the time we weren't able to get enough excitement behind it, is getting quick start guides, user guides. So the OpenTofu documentation is very technical. It goes into how you would use a particular feature, maybe give an example with some context, but we would love to spin up a project. The person who was doing this earlier on left the project, but we would love for people in the community to come together, create this sort of resource, something we could put in a host on the opentofu.org website, and just get people a set of good practices, quick start guide, and just good examples of how this works within a well-manicured environment, if that makes sense. So it looks like we got another question over here.
Yeah, so we switched to OpenTofu, and some of our providers are not signed. So I reached out to all of our providers, and some of them did come and sign, but we have some that never responded to my suggestion that they sign, and others that just said, we don't care. Is there any sort of plan for the future where, for people that aren't going to sign, that we could still kind of verify that, even though they're not signing, that there could be some sort of middle process to where we could verify that, hey, the provider is coming from the OpenTofu registry?
So I think the best thing we have today is each provider, as part of a release, has a SHASM file, which is signed. Again, if you would need to cryptographically verify that, but there's actually multiple checks, and this is actually related to the RFC you and I were talking about earlier. There is, the way the OpenTofu registry works is it scans GitHub for new releases of providers it knows about every 15 minutes, which is, GitHub doesn't love that we do this, but they haven't complained loudly yet, so we're just gonna keep doing it the way we're doing it. But anyway, so the providers say, here's my SHASMs file for all of the different release assets. OpenTofu, when it's running, downloads that SHASMs file and checks it against the provider. Additionally, the registry, when it's pulling in information about the release, pulls in that SHASMs file at that current point in time and records it within the registry metadata and serves that to OpenTofu. So OpenTofu is checking both what's currently released by the provider and what the registry scanned shortly after release. So can you pad files to mess with SHASMs? Yes, SHA-256 sums, but is it a perfect system? No, but we do have, I guess I would call them multiple redundant checks based on SHASM, which is, I think, as good as we can do as of today without actually having the public key. If we were able to get that public key directly from the developer, or get their signing key from the developers, that's the ideal, but there's a reason OpenTofu has an option to skip, an option turned on by default to skip that. If you ever do get to the point where all of your providers are signed and all those keys are registered, then there's an option in OpenTofu to say, hey, we're all good. You don't have to be a little bit hand-wavy about this anymore. You can be strict. And that is in our documentation. I do not remember the name of that environment flag off the top of my head, though. Sorry.
We have time for one more question.
So state encryption, I saw that stabilization got moved into a future version. It seems like there wasn't enough feedback on that. I think there's definitely a lot of interest in using that, but also at the same time, it's a little scary potentially being a first mover on that because of, I don't know, losing those keys potentially. So basically what I would like to know is, do you know of anybody using state encryption at any scale?
I would guess at least the developers who originally helped get that off the ground, it was a guy, I believe is, oh man, my brain is not, I'm not going to make a guess because I know I'm going to get it wrong, but you can look back in the GitHub history. So there was, the way state encryption was added to OpenTofu, this was our first big standalone feature. A company approached us saying, hey, we have some developer time and we have been maintaining our own fork of Terraform for years, adding our own version of state encryption. We would love to help contribute that to OpenTofu. So I imagine they're running OpenTofu with that. I don't know if they would appreciate me saying their name here, but they are part of the Git history, part of that discussion. So state encryption itself is stable in OpenTofu. That is something that is there to stay. The issue that was brought up was we have a way of plugging in external key providers. And so external key providers, external methods. I did actually talk to someone today who is using it in production quite successfully. And I begged and pleaded with them to add a comment to the GitHub issue to say, yes, I'm using this. And this has been my experience. As far as we know, like, we've tested it, we've used it, we have helped a few people with the feature over time. So we know that it is being used in the wild. We're just not sure how widely and if there's any glaring issues with the protocol we've defined that would cause us to want to revise it. So yeah, I guess the biggest thing is this kind of gets back to, if you're using OpenTofu and something's working well, sometimes there's an issue saying, hey, could you please let us know that it is working well? That's also our issue with migrating to OpenTofu. Also, thank you, Fidelity, for contributing a blog post about your migration to the OpenTofu website. But one of our biggest issues is we don't get positive feedback because it just works. People migrate to OpenTofu and they don't make a big hullabaloo out of it. Yes, it takes time to switch your binaries across, and there have been lots of talks on that, but actually doing the migration, because we do follow the 1.0 compatibility promise, means that it just works, and most time people aren't shouting it from the rooftops because they've got the next fire to put out. So we do have like adoption numbers. We track GitHub downloads because that's public information. But honestly, hopping in Slack and saying, "Hey, this feature is working great for me," that helps us feel more confident that what we did was the right thing, and that we know people are using it, and we know they are getting good. That we're getting good feedback. Sorry, it's been a long day. I don't know.
And clapping loudly also works. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you.
All right, Larry, Dio, Christian, thank you so much for joining the impromptu Ask the Dev session.